All right, we're going to, besides feeling betrayed, as that article said, there's another significant pain point that I'm hearing in my early career coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you hear it. And we're not going to blame you, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Those horrible recruiters.
Oh, yeah.
They never get back to me.
Oh, yeah.
I get ghosted.
Yeah.
I apply for a job. I don't hear whatever, right? What's up with that? How do you build relationships? And you spent many years in, as you just told us, talent acquisition and
Yeah.
recruiting,
Yeah.
right? What was your approach? But what advice would you have for young people today who are not big fans of recruiters?
Yeah. Well, look, there's some great recruiters, like with every profession. You've got some outstanding recruiters and you've got some just okay recruiters. Look, I think technology plays a role. In the time that I ran acquisition in a few organizations, the recruitment technologies were advancing.
Yeah.
And now I'd imagine you might get an AI response when you send in a resume.
If any. Yeah.
And you're not even getting, and look, in the organizations I worked for, I think we tried. Like we customized, rejection letters. We tried to be kind, but you get so many people applying. And to be honest with you, a lot of people just apply to apply. They're not even, their background isn't even relevant. And recruiters can get very frustrated with that. Right. So if you're in the seat of the recruiter, that recruiter might have to go through thousands of resumes. And I would imagine, again, depending on the systems they have, they might be able to pull the best ones based on word searches, right, which is important.
Today, using algorithms.
Using algorithms.
Tracking systems.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn uses that too. But look, I think there is no excuse for a recruiter not to get back to somebody. And I say that having been a recruiter on the ground for many, many years before technology took over, but there's no excuse. And here's where there's no excuse. When you just send in a resume blindly, you're going to get an automatic response. Don't take it personally, but don't make that how you search for your job, because it could be very frustrating. Mm-hmm. When you've had an interview with a recruiter, and I would say this is true both in executive search and corporate recruiters, I find it amazing that after you've actually met with a recruiter, you never hear back from them. That is inexcusable.
Does that happen to anybody, right? Sometimes it happens,
That is inexcusable. Right? It is rude. It is unprofessional.
How does that even happen?
It happens, though, and in fact, it happens to executives, too. In fact, when I was looking for a talent acquisition lead job, it was after I left Citibank, I had recruiters do that to me. Yeah. And I was going to be running talent acquisition somewhere.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. So either they're overwhelmed, or honestly, they're just not that communicative as people. And it doesn't mean that all recruiters are that way. You've got some wonderful recruiters that really like a personal touch. And that would go for executive search professionals too. When I had to refer people into executive search folks just for kind of, exploratory interviews, many won't do it. They won't waste their time. They'll just focus on the searches that they're getting paid for. And I get it, right? Because search is hard. But the ones that I would often approach, I knew, and I didn't approach them every week, but I knew that they really put a stake on, taking the time to do a half-hour exploratory with someone, because you never knew where that could lead. Right. So again, I think some recruiters have, lead with their heart around this. Yeah. Some of them, though, it is a very transactional. And the more junior you are, you're going to get caught up in that whole set of transactions, because these recruiters are looking for, a diamond in a haystack. I mean, that gets us a little bit to resumes and how people write their resumes. And I've seen some really good resumes. Mm-hmm. I've seen some really awful resumes where you've got to talk about your skills at the very top. You've got to be able to sell yourself, because the recruiter will take 5 seconds to look from your name, start going down. And if they're not pulled in that thing at the top, your skill sets, your career summary, whatever you want to put in there, you're done. Right?
Well, I'll even go one step further. I think the applicant tracking system is pulling the skills from your resume, and if the recruiter does go to you, they're going to look at your cover letter first. And then they're going to do a reconciliation, but you need to have a cover letter that pulls you in and starts telling your story.
That's right.
This is my brand.
A succinct cover letter.
Very succinct.
You and I are in agreement there. I advocate that all the time, but you know this, right? What percentage of cover letters, and it doesn't matter, is the final answer, are read by recruiters, right?
I don't know.
Secondly, what percentage even ask for cover letters?
Or let you submit one.
There's a trick
Some
to
of
that.
them
They just
don't
want
even
resumes.
No, there's a trick. You know how you do it?
Yeah.
I've told you this.
Right.
When you upload your resume, whether it's asked for or not, and it's only one page, right,
Yes.
especially for early career.
Yeah.
Listen out there, guys. You just add the cover letter, even if not asked.
Yeah. As part of the
Because-
attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
So
do
now
that.
you have a 2-page submission, right? But what's your view on this, right? I mean, I think you just said it right. There are recruiters and there are recruiters, but there's no excuse. It's a pet peeve, right?
No, it's not.
What do you think the impact of the on the company and the culture is to a young person who gets ghosted?
Yeah, this is what I would say to any recruiters listening to this, and I used to say this to my team, and my team would remind me too. We are, in the world of HR and talent, we are, as recruiters, the first line of contact.
Yes.
We are the brand. And anybody who we touch in the recruiting process, whether we are interviewing them generically or even when we're turning them down, they should love the company because we were empathetic, we listened, we turned them down gently, we gave them the reasons why. If you can get into some of that detail, sometimes it's just there was a lot of competition for this job, you're great, but you want them to leave you feeling great about the company.
Absolutely.
And really out there being your advocate as a company. So I think that is possible. I've seen that happen. The other thing that I think, happens with applicant tracking, but also these databases that technology is supposed to help you with, if you're doing it right, anyone you touch, their backgrounds are potentially relevant. They're in your database. It may be that I interview you today, Bill, and you know what? I don't have the right job for you today, but I'm going to keep you in my database. And we did. In the teams I ran, we really farmed and cultivated and kept a high bar for our databases because it made sense, right? And the more we could do some pre-interviews and get to know people, the better. But I think technology can easily get in the way of that personal touch. And then when you're talking volumes of people who are unemployed, applying. But look, I think the best recruiters in my experience are those that bring the head and the heart to their work and that take the time to turn someone down or at least put a nice note together saying, hey, I'll keep you in mind for the future.
Right.
Yeah,
And
or-
you might not see that for your entry-level position
You
for
might
your
not.
first
But
job.
you could at least get a AI generated,
You might.
nicely written, generic, of course.
And I think a lot of
Sorry.
firms do have
Yeah,
that.
But there's no excuse to get totally ghosted, right? And
No.
I guarantee you, because I hear it every day, that is, and then
It's not just happening to early career.
No,
I mean,
it's-
experienced
Why?
people
It's
have it
amazing.
happen to them too. It's just unacceptable. I'm sorry. If you pride yourself on doing your job well as a recruiter, again, I go back to everyone that you have interacted with should feel great about the company and their experience
Yeah,
with you.
you're right.
And that's not going to happen if you ghost me. So,
Yeah.
again, I think, I don't know, but I think hiring is harder. And I think sometimes the technology and the tracking processes make it a little bit more difficult. And also they're easy to hide behind.
yeah.
You know.
So before we get hater messages from all recruiters out there, let me.
Hey, I love recruiters. I am a recruiter. I was a recruiter.
This is real experience that I've had. It's actually my son-in-law who told me this, who applied for a job at Google. He's now there, and it's been a few years back. What they do is the recruiter, by culture there, apparently, and I think they still do this, is assigned to be your advocate.
Yep.
And you've probably
Once
heard
you've been
this.
hired?
No.
Oh, before.
During the recruiting process.
Oh, that's great.
Think about this, right?
Yeah.
Once you get beyond an initial screen, I
yeah.
think I'm describing this accurately, at Google. Don't know if they still do it, but they did, right? That recruiter is your advocate to the candidate, right? I have a live candidate here. I want to find, I'm the recruiter.
Yeah.
I want to find the right person for that software engineer job, whatever, right? And I'm going to help that candidate. It's amazing they're able to do this through the process, giving them advice, almost some counsel and coaching,
Right.
and help them through the overall recruiting. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't heard that formally, but again, I go back to really great recruiters do that naturally.
Or cultures.
You stay
firms.
attached to your candidate. It's in your best interest to prep that candidate before they come back for
Yes.
interviews, to prep the team that's going to be interviewing them. Now, you can't do it when you're doing high volume recruiting, but
No.
it's certainly a lot of what I did because I wanted the candidate to be successful, whether they got the job or not. But you should never go into interviews and not know who you're interviewing with, what their job titles are.
Yeah.
You know, the recruiter plays a huge role in that. And again, you can't do that effectively when you're dealing with high volume.
Yeah, no, you can't do
So,
it at
Bill,
volume.
you recruited over 300 people from the University of Miami to work at Citi.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I just referred them, coached them, and gave them an entry introduction. Yes.
Right. But you did prepare them.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yes.
did you prepare the people you were introducing them to?
Yeah, they got tired of hearing from me. There goes Bill again, advocating for the U, right?
Right.
Because he's the Miami guy, right?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
but I was okay with that.
Yeah.
And you're not the only person that does that. It's not
No,
only
but-
the University of Miami.
No,
They
but
have people
they have
from
to be
all over.
qualified candidates.
That's
right.
I would not refer
That's right.
somebody if they had no idea what they were getting into.
Of course.
But if I found
Yeah.
a high qualified
Yeah.
internship candidate,
Yeah.
I'd be all over it trying to help. I'm doing it now, right?
Right.
Trying to help them. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to position yourself. But then after that, and we'll get to interviewing maybe, right?
Yeah.
Then you're on your own. You got to go crush the interview.
Yeah. The one thing I would say about recruiters, look, I think, again, as part of your network, you know, if you
Yeah.
can find someone at a company that maybe you went to school with, alumni networks are very important in that respect,
Yeah.
that you can kind of find a connection to a recruiter. Develop a rapport with one or two
Sure.
recruiters, right?
Right.
That isn't going to ghost you because you're not interviewing with them, but you can say, hey, I'd love to bounce some ideas off of you, whatever. Again, if you find the right recruiters, and there are many of them out there, they will take the time, particularly if they know you're connected with somebody in their company. And I think, you know, that is one of the things that you can do, particularly if you have that recruiter's email. But again, I think when they're dealing with high volume, it's tough, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible.
No, but I'm going to make one more comment about recruiters, and then I promise we'll move on. The other thing I hear all the time, which just drives me crazy, you know, oh, I got a super day, I hear from a candidate, which means I'm going to interview, it's beyond first round.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to interview with 3 individuals, a client of mine, right, in the career coaching. Oh, great. You need to stalk them on LinkedIn because in advance, because interview prep includes
Knowing
having
who you're gonna
who
interview
you can
with.
interview with, and I like to advocate 2 questions for each interviewer, one personal, one strategic about the role. And then they say to me, but you know what? They haven't told me who I'm interviewing with.
Yeah. Okay.
Even at my previous firm, my only firm, right? Some do, some don't.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't a recruiter
They should.
give the candidate the opportunity to do their research about who's going to talk to them?
Well, at a very minimum, they should give them the names of the people they're interviewing with and their
email-
titles.
Yeah,
And
they
where
can't
they
even
sit in
send
the
a thank you.
business. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's I don't know.
Yeah. Again, it's just what we're talking about are best practices when they
Yeah, I
happen well.
guess.
When they don't happen at all, shame on those organizations. You know, you're losing an opportunity to really promote your brand and, you know, demonstrate to a potential candidate.
But when you
What's wrong with
ran
that?
recruiting shops,
Yeah.
would you ever say to your team of recruiters, here's the way we want to show
Sure.
up
Yeah.
and represent ourselves?
Yes, of course we did.
As you said,
Yes.
frontline interaction around the firm and the brand.
We did. We did a lot of that. And,
Doesn't happen
you know,
often.
again, I think, look, you can only put best practices out there and encourage your team to do that. Some recruiters did it better than others, you know, depending on the volume on their plate. I get it.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, we put together, my last organization, you know, best practices in recruiting. In fact, at one point we did a lot of work. Actually, we worked in partnership with Microsoft on accessibility and disabilities and how we could become better recruiters in interviewing someone with a disability. You know, we'd never really got that training, and so you know we had a whole different view on this. Is before COVID, but you know maybe you know someone on the spectrum may not want to come in person to an interview. So let's offer them a phone call, or at that point, you know, Zoom wasn't as usable. But that was one example where, wait a minute, guys, there's a huge talent pool out there. If we're not approaching them in the right way or giving them options of how to interview with us, then we're going to miss that talent pool.
Right, we're losing out.
We're losing out. And so that was just one example where the recruiters were, oh, wow, I had never thought about that.
Yeah.
So is it that it's an employer's market? And when it becomes an employee's market, you'll start to see a change in
You do see those shifts,
and you
right?
do see those shifts.
Yeah, there goes the referral fee from $2,000 to $5,000.
Right.
We need to get more of these, right? Yes.
But Bill, you made a point, and I think this is true no matter whether the market's up, down, all over the place. You know, as a candidate, you have to do your homework. You have to be prepared. You have to be ready when you go into interview with a few questions. Hopefully you're talking more than the interviewer. One of the things I used to ask my candidates, particularly at the senior levels, when I debriefed them, and again, I could do it because I didn't have, 100 jobs I was filling, but hey, tell me, what percentage of the time in the interview did you talk versus the interviewer, who normally was quite senior? And that told me everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I spoke 80% of the time, and they spoke 20. Yes, great. When it was the reverse, not good, right? But it happens. And again, not everyone's a great interviewer, and some people don't interview a lot, but I think, again, the other thing a good recruiter will do, and it's easier to do at the more senior levels, is to prep the people interviewing for interviewing the candidate. We used to go through designing, packages, protocols on, hey, you're going to focus on customer service, and here's 5 questions to probe.
Differentiate what you're going to work on.
So that every candidate can get the same 2 questions.
Yeah, but half the interviewers I never listened to never listened to what they ever told me because I had my own
Well, you
approach,
did, but the average line person who doesn't interview.
All right, I'm going to shift this here. So listen, here's another pivot here, which you have unique expertise on. Coaching. Let's go there for a minute. What I find might be very helpful to early career professionals. You coach today senior, sometimes C-suite, or close to it, executives.
Yep.
Reflecting on what you're dealing with today, do's and don'ts, gaps and positives. What advice would you have for just entering the job market based on what you're seeing today that are thematically things that you're often coaching on, if you follow my drift? In other words, what would you tell young people today? Do more of this, do less of that, because when you get to these senior levels, I'm still seeing, meaning you, some of that occurring.
Yeah. I will say a lot of the leaders I coach are already great at what they do, and we use a feedback mechanism. So there's always one thing. There's always things you can continue, some you might want to stop, and some you might want to start, right? I would say, if I look at, again, skills, capabilities, your reputation is hugely important, and you develop that the minute you're born, I guess, right? But certainly as you're an early career professional, your reputation, what people think of you, how people experience you is really important throughout your career. And when I think about the leaders I coach and the feedback they get, those that are what I would call very high character reputations, they're trusted. People can trust them, whether it's a peer or whether it's someone on their team, that people feel like that person has their back. Integrity is hugely important. They do what they say they're going to do. They tell the truth, and they're responsible. And if something goes wrong, and they've made a mistake, they'll own up to it. So to me, these are things that, everything you should have learned in kindergarten, right? I mean, these are things that I think I do find themes on. And a lot of the leaders I coach are very good in those things. But, sometimes they just need to up their game in a couple areas, right? And I think people being heard. If you're getting feedback from people across the board that you're working with, people want to feel like they're heard and listened to. And that also, it's no question you're competent, you're skilled technically, but do you also have, the empathy and the compassion as a leader, for people? And do people feel that about you? I coached someone recently, we're walking through his feedback, and, he was a big revenue generator for his firm, but one of the most humble leaders I've talked to in a while, like ego in check. He knew he was a big revenue, but he didn't have a swagger about him. Not that that's a problem, but he was likable. People trusted him. People liked working with him. And I think these are things, even when you're early on in your career, are really important to how people perceive you and how people experience you.
Right.
And I think that those can carry you throughout your career. When you're early on in your career, pitching in, helping out a colleague, helping pitch in to make them successful, do the right thing. Those things I think are really important. And if you can carry those through in your career, I think they serve you really well.
Yeah. You're talking about things that we often refer to as your personal brand, right?
Yes.
How you show up.
Yes.
But it's interesting. Sometimes, I'm thinking back at my time in corporate life, you see juniors thinking they only have to manage up.
Yes.
Which is a big mistake.
Big mistake.
Right? And they don't develop equally effective relationships with those that are more junior around them.
Well, your peers, they say, are your best places for feedback because they'll always be brutally honest with you. The other thing that often I'll do if I'm doing a 360 for feedback, I won't just ask for feedback of the direct report to that person. I'll go one down.
Sure.
Because those people really see you for who you are and they're really honest. So I think, again, being concerned about how you show up to everybody, not just the person above you.
Well, how important is it to have your advocates be your peers?
Yeah.
Super important, right?
Super important. Yeah. Well, I think, again, I don't like the word likability, but there is something to that. I like working with you. Mm-hmm. I trust you. I feel good working with you. I know you have my back. I can make a mistake. You won't blame me for it, but you'll point it out to me. The tough love is there too as a good leader, right?
She's smart. She's reliable. She's likable. All these things make a big difference.
And she does an excellent job at what she does, right? And so the other thing I was thinking about on the way over here today, no one wants to hear this sometimes, but sometimes, and I think this is true throughout the ages, you may be in a job today, but sometimes you actually have to do a little more. In fact, you might even have to do some of the roles and the responsibilities of the job that you want to get promoted into before you even get tapped for that, to demonstrate that you have some ambition. Again, it's not unbridled, but you're eager, you're hungry, you're curious, you want to do the best job you possibly can do, and then how many people ever ask their boss, assuming that they're doing their day job really well, what more can I do? Yeah. How can I help you? What more can I take on? And so that really always impresses bosses, I think, if someone asks them that.
And you'll remember this. There's another side to that, and you alluded to it. I remember this in our talent reviews. If you're in the circle and you haven't filled your circle yet, don't go out of inappropriate ambition, we used to call it, right?
Yeah.
Don't go out of that circle prematurely.
Right.
Meaning, to your point, show the motivation you have to continue to grow and develop, but don't leave half that circle of your real job today unfulfilled.
Yeah.
That's a tough balance sometimes, but I think very appropriately said. And again, what we're talking about on brand, you know this, we all know this, one of the biggest career derailers in corporate life or any life, personal life, is you think you're coming across one way and you're seen by those who truly are observing you totally different.
That's why feedback
You're derailing.
is really great, because you can't dispute the feedback, what people think of you. And so derailers are huge for some leaders. And at the end of the day, they will not be successful in driving their organizations forward because they don't win the hearts and the minds of their people, period.
But enlightened individuals want to understand, am I okay, right? Or am I misconceiving the way I think I'm showing up in the workplace?
Asking for feedback is hard, but it can be really helpful. And to Jerry's point on advocacy, I think at the end of the day, you want your peers to really want you to get promoted, want you to move ahead, and that that's a rare sort of combination, but it's a really important thing, I think. And it gets back to, I trust this person, they're excellent at their role. They're not competing just for competing's sake. They don't leave bodies in their wake. They actually work, really well with other people. I mean, those are really important traits, in life generally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. All right, rapid fire, because we only have a few minutes left, right? One other theme, we've alluded to it. You've interviewed thousands, perhaps, probably,
Maybe.
in your career. Some tips for the listeners out there.
Yeah.
What really has impressed you thematically over the years about individuals that you have interviewed. And maybe on the other side of that, real quick, the other side. This is really a turnoff when this occurs at whatever levels, junior, mid, or senior, but our audience is mostly junior. What are some of the tips from a recruiter's vantage point that you've seen and you could share?
Yeah, look, interviews are hard, particularly if you're doing them virtually. You just lose something in the translation, I believe. But that's the way it is right now. I think, I always coach people that are going on interviews. It's your opportunity to tell your story. Your resume fronts you, no question. But you really want to be able to tell the recruiter, and again, presuming that the recruiter is a good recruiter, is asking the right questions or structuring it in the right way. Why'd you go there after school? And to tell your story. Well, this is my motivation. Short and succinct, right? But here's where I landed today, and here's why I did. But I think the story is really important, and I think it's less starchy then. It doesn't sound like you're scripted. That you're really just talking from the heart about what I did and the decisions I made at the time. Many organizations use the competency-based recruiting. So tell me about a time that. So I usually try to prep, folks that are going into interviews, particularly even at senior levels, right? Have a couple of examples in your mind of a really difficult situation that, you lived through, that you resolved. What did you learn from it? You have a few of those in your mind to be able to speak to outside of your story. And I think, look, you want as a recruiter to really get to know what makes this person tick. So the more it can feel like a genuine interaction, that the person's really describing themselves accurately, that they're self-aware. Self-awareness is huge in coaching as well, right, for people. And they know who they are. And they also have thought about, why am I here interviewing with you today? So things that are sort of don'ts are, don't go into an interview and never have done your homework on the company. Know about that company, know about the industry, whether you're reading it on websites or talking to people in it, getting a sense for it, and know something about why you want to do this job, what's attractive to you about this role, and also what you can contribute, because it has to work both ways. It's not only what the company can give you, but what am I going to bring the company? What am I looking to contribute and make an impact in is important. The other thing, and I think this happens more at more entry or early career professionals, sometimes there's an over-focus in the first interview on what am I going to get paid and the benefits or
Never
vacation.
Bring that up. Yeah.
And I say that is not a conversation ever, unless you've been made an offer.
Right.
And once you've made an offer, then that's a whole other conversation and negotiation.
Of course.
But if you're fronting the, what's the vacation, that doesn't tell me as a recruiter that you're really interested in the organization at large, or it tells me what you're interested in, right? So I think, those are easy things to kind of, to tailor if you're getting prepped before an interview. But to me, being curious, having a few questions, and having done your homework. I mean, I know those sound really basic. But hopefully, and to your point, have a few questions for the recruiter. Why do you tell me a little about what drew you here? What do you like about the culture?
Yeah,
it could be as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well said, Barbara. I want to thank you.
This
we're
fun.
Approaching an hour here, and we'll wrap up shortly. But I think we've gotten the other side here, meaning from the recruiter's perspective and hitting some of the pain points. Sorry, I'm all over the place here.
Yeah.
Hitting some of the pain points that young professionals are having, right? And demystifying some of that. And giving some insight on what a good recruiter should be doing and how to distinguish yourself with that recruiter. I think that's excellent advice for those listening out there, and we thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. We'd like to move to the roundtable if you'll join us.
Sure.
And we're going to bring in an individual who is searching for her entry-level position.
Great.
And if you'd be so kind as to join us, maybe we can give her some of your insights to help her through.
Yeah, well, I think with the three of us, she's got a good resources, right? But
Let's
happy
hope.
to do that. No, happy to do that. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you again soon.